The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is a hypothetical region in the Pacific Ocean where billions of tons of plastics have built up and are swirling around and around in a cesspool unlike anyone has ever seen. And there's good reason why no one has seen it, because it's not there. And in this podcast, you're going to learn the difference between the myths and the science behind the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which the media uses to fearmonger against humanity. We're all at fault here, and it is our fault that this giant garbage patch is whirling around the Pacific. Now, this all began in 2018 when a paper came out that you're looking at here. Evidence that the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is rapidly accumulating plastic. And then, well, it was off to the races. Speculatory maps. Here we can see the Great Pacific Garbage Patch bigger than the United States. And then there was multiple patches, some of them with whirlpool shapes. But none of these are actually real. And it's interesting that I'm going to read to you from NOAA's website itself. And they want to clarify as well what the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is. Now, while everything may be bigger in Texas, some reports about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch would leave you to believe lots of things. That this marine mass of plastic is bigger than Texas, maybe twice as big as Texas, or even twice as big as the continental U.S. Now, you have to remember, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, it wouldn't be visible if you were on a boat and driving across it. That's just how big it is. But these garbage patches aren't solid patches in any shape of the form at all. The mainstream media and the fearmongers and the environmentalists conjure images of a floating landfill in the middle of the ocean with miles of bobbing plastic bottles and rogue yogurt cups. And while it's true that these areas do have a higher concentration of plastics than other parts of the ocean, much of the debris found in these so-called garbage patches are tiny bits of plastic or microplastics smaller than 5 millimeters, and they're suspended in the water column, not even floating. The debris is more like flecks of pepper in a bowl of soup rather than a skim of fat that accumulates or sits on the surface. Now, these microplastics are nearly ubiquitous today in the marine environment, which means they're everywhere. And they may come from larger pieces of plastic that have broken down over time, or from fleece jackets or plastic microbeads added to face scrubs or things like that. And the impacts of these microplastics on marine life is currently an area of active research. But the larger debris that the mainstream media fearmongers about, here you see a turtle tied in a bag. How is that even possible? The majority of the pictures of the garbage in these articles are in nearshore environments, which are nowhere near these garbage patches in the middle of the ocean. And here another one about the Pacific Garbage Patch, and they show a picture of a tidal area where trash accumulates. And even here, the Environmental Center at the University of Boulder, they have the fake map of the garbage patches, and then they show garbage near major cities in a coastal estuary, not anywhere near where these patches are supposed to be. And that's because the majority of plastics that humans throw out end up being beached. They never make it out into the ocean. And these are the scientific facts. Now, the reason these plastics get beached is because of wave action. They can't make it out into the ocean. But why are these plastics accumulating on rivers near major cities? Are the cities just dumping the trash into the rivers? Well, we'll expose that truth near the end of the podcast. But the fact is that the majority of the trash that gets lost from landfills and dirty humans littering comes back to our shores and gets beached and then buried. It never gets out into the ocean. The vast majority. Here we can see more trash in a tidal estuary accumulating. And again, more trash being beached. And here's a third world country where people are actually at the beach in this condition and they think it's okay, I guess. Not a single person with the bag cleaning up trash. But if they want, they can head over to McDonald's and there's some, looks like $1 million beachfront condos there. This pollution is because of corrupt governments, because of corrupt multinational corporations which continue to produce this garbage. And therefore, the consumer, us, we have to buy it. We don't have any other, very few alternatives. If we were to ban plastic bottles, this problem would end. And here again, they're talking about the Pacific Garbage Patch and they're showing trash on shore. Now, this is the reason I made the podcast. The first 100,000 kilograms have been removed, and a paper came out on July 25th, 2 days ago, revealing what they knew in 2018. So remember, in 2018, they did a survey, and guess what that survey found in 2018? That the majority of the stuff that's out in these hypothetical garbage patches that are hard to see because they're invisible, and they only have slightly more plastics than other areas because of circulating currents, that the trash in there was from the fishing industry, not from onshore environments. The majority of the trash floating in the ocean has nothing to do with us onshore. Because I showed you that that plastic garbage washes right up on the beaches and gets buried. And so all the fear-mongering that these activists, these environmentalists, these alarmists have been screaming about banning plastic and whatnot, they need to ban fishing because the material from this first load, not a single water bottle was found. 80% were fishing nets. 10% were fishing buoys and other containers. You can see it here. This is the load from the trawl. These are fishing vessel sorting trays, buoys, and nets. This is the garbage from the boats that are catching the fish that we eat in the supermarkets. I didn't see a single headline or breaking news about the fact that the fishing industry is responsible for the great garbage patch in the Pacific. Did you? And in fact, if you watch this 1 million+ view video on the Great Garbage Patch, you will be just as misinformed as everyone else. Now, the truth is, our planet is choking on plastic, and it's not your fault. The chances that everyone is going to get a mason jar and filter their own water and drink that every day is low because it's just too cheap and convenient to buy a $3 case of water that actually gives you cancer. So we need to stop choking the planet with plastics. We need to stop corrupt governments from allowing multinational corporations to continue to make these products. Did you know that an estimated 583 billion plastic bottles were produced last year? 583 billion. That's 100 billion more than were produced just 5 years ago. And there is no end in sight. This year, 5 trillion plastic bags will be used. That's 160,000 plastic bags every second. And Americans alone use 500 million drinking straws every day. If you start adding this up, that's trillions and trillions of pieces of trash. It's not sustainable. In fact, the planet will be buried in 3 meters of trash in just 5 decades. Plastic trash. The amount of single-use plastics used globally has tripled since the start of the pandemic, with takeout orders driving the increase. Imagine how much styrofoam that is. Enough to fill 1,000 Shea Stadiums. Each year, enough bubble wrap was created globally to cover the distance between the Earth and the Moon. And in the U.S., we throw away more than 50 billion coffee cups every year. And these are coated with plastic to laminate the inside, and they also use plastic lids. And then let's not talk about the 4.5 trillion cigarette butts every year that get flicked onto the ground. But what about the corrupt governments? Like this shot in India, where the local municipality is literally dumping residential waste into the river. Look at all the witnesses. They're even backing up the trucks. This is their river. This is their planet. This is where they live. And this is just the nature of how disgusting humans are. And maybe it is time for the great culling. Because if people can just back up vehicles into their local city and dump residential waste. Look at all these people waving them in. Come on, back a little, Jimmy. Back it up a little. It's so sad what we've done to the planet. And what's even sadder is that the governments that are corrupt and that are doing things like this, they then pay the media to blame you. And you go along with it. Hook, line, and sinker. Just like the millions of misinformed people that think the Pacific garbage patch has plastic bottles in it. It would take you 5 minutes to learn that these bottles wash back up on shore and they never make it into the ocean. We know what makes it to the ocean. They just removed the first 100,000 kilograms from the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Well, and the facts don't lie. That garbage is from the fishing industry. And you have nothing to do about it. And that's a boom to knowledge. Share this with like-minded people. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. All the links to all the papers will be below, so you can do your own homework. Thank you to our one-time donors, our Patreons, and the heroes that share this video. Be safe. We love you.